Thank you so much for joining us for the 2023 Global DEI Conference, joining together global voices around diversity, equity, and inclusion to really foster thought processes, discussions to create a more equitable workforce. I am so delighted to be joined today by Rachel Morris, who is the co-founder of Motion Learning, an executive coach, and a really specialist parental coach. Rachel, over to you and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. It's really lovely to see you, and it's really great to hear that you have been having a wonderful conference so far. So, hi, everybody. Welcome. It's really nice to be here with you today, and I would personally love to be able to find out more about you before we talk, but it's a little bit tricky, both with the time we have and because we are not, sadly, in a physical room together. Please, though, can I ask that you use the chat during the course of this presentation so that you can say hi to both me and each other. And also, please feel free as we go along to add any questions or comments that come to mind. If we've time to answer them in the call, I will. And if not, if you leave me your email, I will send you my thoughts afterwards. You will soon start to know that I'm a person on a mission with this kind of thing. And so creating dialogue, talking with people, keeping conversation going, learning together is a critical part of that for me. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. So as you know, my name is Rachel Morris. I'll tell you a bit about me. So I am a professional business coach. I'm a practitioner at heart to my core. And even after over 20 years, I still coach on a weekly basis, holding a client list of my own. Through structured conversation, I work with individuals and teams to enable them to be effective and fulfilled in their role. One of my children says that my job is to help people be slightly happier at work, at life, and I think that that's a pretty good KPI. I'm also a founding partner of 2 coaching companies. So I have Motion Learning, which is a professional coaching company focused on progressing people and organizations through the art or the act of coaching. And the second is called Coach Community, a not-for-profit dedicated to supporting communities by making coaching accessible and to developing new coaches that are starting their entry into our profession. But besides these things, and very important for our conversation today, is that I'm a working parent of 2 children, just over a year apart, and I have worked since they were 6 weeks old. So if we think about being a parent in the workplace, I've got a lot of personal experience of that. I'm also a writer, and my new book, Working Mother, will be available for pre-sale in January. I'm also the person behind the Parental Transition Coaching Model, which is based on over 10 years of research and used in companies across the globe to support the working parents in their ranks. Hence today's topic, because I've already said I'm on a mission to support working parents and change things for the people that are coming through in the future. So that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about parental transition coaching, why it's important, and how it benefits both employers and employees. I guess it would help if I just start by being clear about what I mean when I use the term parental transition coaching. The parental transition is the journey a person goes on in response to the arrival of a child. It starts before the physical arrival, typically while the individual is still in the workplace. It carries on once the child arrives in the person's life, and then it begins to conclude in the months after the person returns to work with the child in their world. To be clear, we are talking here about the transition of birth parents and non-birth parents, first-time parents, and those with multiple children, biological and non-biological parents, because everyone in all circumstances experiences this as a very significant time of change and therefore of transition. So that's what I mean when I say parental transition, the period before a person becomes a parent, during and then after when they return back into the workplace. Now, parental transition coaching is a form of support that can be offered to people navigating this particular transition. Typically, it's offered by organisations on a one-to-one basis, with the coach supporting the working parent individually. Now, in a moment, I'm going to show you what we found out about how coaching positively impacts people's experience of parental transition. But before I do, let's be clear about why this topic is so important. You may be clear already, but let's just kind of really have it in the forefront of our minds. A recent, very comprehensive study conducted by YouGov involving over 6,000 respondents shed light on this issue. Astonishingly, close to 38% of mothers revealed that having children had had a detrimental impact on their careers. In stark contrast, only 14% of fathers expressed a similar sentiment, with a noteworthy 1/3 of fathers believing that parenthood actually benefited their professional growth. It's interesting, isn't it? In another study across 25 European countries, it was found that the motherhood penalty accounted for 60% of the gender pay gap, with factors such as social norms, gender stereotyping, and discrimination making up the remaining 40%. But as we know, it's not all about gender for certain. Numerous global studies, increasing in their regularity and their scope, thankfully, highlight the huge links between loss of talent, gaps in talent pipelines, and the point at which employees become parents, for all parents. Now, this is changing through laws, through increased accountability, and through things like workplace education. So what's interesting is that the stats, although really quite tragic and very sad from my perspective at the moment, are changing, and they are changeable. We can change things for the better. Now, I believe that it doesn't have to be via some huge, complicated intervention. I believe that the solutions to some of this particular problem can be relatively simple. We've got the evidence to suggest that simple but sophisticated interventions, such as parental transition coaching, can be highly effective when it comes to retaining talent that is all too often lost during this particular. So let's move on just to think about, how does parental transition coaching do this? So here's how. I mentioned something called the parental transition coaching model briefly a moment ago. You may already have come across this, but if you haven't, then I'm going to show you, because this is what it looks like. Here we go. So you'll see from this model that there are 3 distinct phases, which I've already mentioned. And we believe that the response that is needed at each of these phases is slightly different. Phase 1, you will see this is, the point at which, you can see tech, fortunately, tech isn't my currency, hey, emotions and behavior are. But you will see that in the first phase, when the person in the workplace is first embarking on their parental journey, you will see that we believe they need high support. You will see that in the second page, in the second phase, in the second column, the new parent, they're probably at home, might be off on parental leave for a shorter or longer period of time. We believe that actually what they need there is to be empowered. And in the third phase, you will see that we believe the new parent needs to be supported as they re-enter the workplace to use their energy from phase 2 in order to really connect with themselves and in order to take action. I'm just going to take you through this model in a little bit more detail, and you will see, for example, that we have been able to identify the emotions that people typically present in coaching at each of these different phases. So, for example, the emotions typically experienced in phase 1, of course, include excitement. A new parent sitting there still at their desk, ready for the imminent arrival of their child, is undoubtedly going to be feeling excited. It's a wonderful thing. But in coaching, people always tell us that they also feel really quite scared, that they can feel really quite overwhelmed, and therefore they can often feel really quite anxious. This is driven by this fundamental collision of work life and of home life. So people tell us that two super, super significant things that encompass their identity, things that encompass meaning, things that encompass security, things that encompass motivation, feel like they are about to collide, and they can feel seemingly incompatible. We know that when a person in their workplace, soon to be a parent, is experiencing this, there are certain things that they need space for. They need space to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to explore their fears. They need space to be able to step back and to gain clarity, to really kind of think about what is going on right now. I feel quite overwhelmed. Things are quite confused. Okay, let me start to gain clarity so that we can start to get people feeling in control again. And we know that they need space in order to be able to both set and, importantly, communicate some new boundaries. Knowing this from a coaching perspective, supporting people, we can do things like, okay, let's really understand your transition. Let's talk about what you're experiencing. Let's make sure we prioritize you and don't lose sight of you in the middle of all these demands about home and imminent arrival of a child and work and handover and all those different types of things. Where are you in the middle of this? Through coaching, we can create space for people to really, really regain control over really, really important aspects of their life. And through coaching, we can really, really work with people on how to set things like boundaries. It's interesting because during this first phase of transition as well, we know it's super important for the employee, but also the employer, that the role the person may be leaving for a very short period of time is handed over effectively. So coaching in this early phase of the parental transition is really, really effective for making sure that the work baby is handed over really, really impactfully. So that's what we know about this first phase of transition. From a coach's perspective, we know that at this stage, we need to be offering high levels of support. We don't need to be ramping up the challenge quite there, but what we do need to be doing is offering this higher level of support. If we go on to the second phase, so this is when the person is first living life with a child in their life. And what we know that people present with here from a coaching is a real sense of curiosity. You know, things are a little bit different. Well, how do I feel about this? What is this going to be like for me? It can involve different levels of insecurity. You know, I don't know if I'm any good at this. I don't know how I can do this. I don't know what's pressure. Often pressure. There is a lot of pressure come on parents of children to be things and feel things and experience things. And people think, oh, should I be doing that too or not? And often that can lead to people presenting in coaching is with a real sense of isolation. This is often driven by the sense that obviously everything has changed. And this is why this transition is so significant, because life before the arrival of any child, whether it is an adopted child, a third child, the first time a person is having their own biological child, everything does fundamentally change. Things are not quite the same after as they were before. Some things, but not all things. So during this time, once again, we know that people need space. They need space to be able to do things like reconnect with a sense of themselves. They need space in order to be able to problem solve things like their needs and their priorities. And they need space in order to be able to reconnect to who they are, to build their confidence, to regain a sense of self, to understand what has and what hasn't changed, for good or for not, and to really, really understand how they can use that to take action. If we think about the coaching response, we're focusing here for sure on well-being. We probably don't ever stop focusing on well-being. We're focusing on how to connect with things like, as I've said, your identity. We're focusing on things like motivation towards goals, which may feel like they have completely turned upside down and changed. Parents tell us all the time what was important to me before was not. I still care about work, but it feels like it may have shifted slightly, might have increased in intensity or not. And we work with parents at this phase here in order to help people really think about how they communicate lots of these changes and lots of these experiences. We come to the third phase of the parental transition, and what you will see is here the kind of emotions that people typically show when they are stepping back into the workplace. So this is the first, maybe up to 3 or 4 months in the workplace we've monitored, and have a child in their life or an additional child in their life. People definitely present with a lot of courage. I'm going to do this. I can do this. I want to do this. I must do this. The other things we see, though, are things like conflict, a sense of what needs me. I need to be in this meeting, but actually, I've got to leave this meeting now because I'm going to be in a heap of trouble with the nursery if I'm not there when they close at 6 o'clock. People can often feel quite exposed by this as well. People tell me all the time, both fathers, parents of multiple children will say, there is always this sense of me thinking, am I doing enough? Am I succeeding in any aspect of my life? Sometimes I can feel like I'm failing in all of them. There is often clearly a sense of exhaustion there too. This is quite hard work, this transition for everybody. These emotions appear to us to be driven by things like, juggling seemingly incompatible demands. What one person needs me to do and what another thing needs me to do actually feel like they just don't quite fit. And that can be very, very hard and very exhausting to try to overcome. Once again, we know as professional coaches, we create space for people to be seen, to think and to feel whatever they need to. And we know at this third phase of the parental transition, space is needed to enable people to really regain perspective, regain clarity. Who am I now? What really matters to me now? How do I really feel about this now? To give people the opportunity to do things like increase their confidence and increase their agency. This is okay, this is right for me, and therefore to act decisively on their own priority needs. We do this through helping people understand things like priorities and how they change, identify how priorities can shift from 1 week to the next, from 1 month to the next, sometimes from 1 hour to the next. We help people really work on how they assert themselves. It's great knowing that something matters, but if we can't communicate it with somebody, if we can't influence somebody to actually be able to take it on board, then actually knowing it isn't enough. We also need to be able to show it and share it. So we work on things like assertion, influencing, negotiating in this phase. And also what we do in this third phase is really start to shift people's focus a little bit, just from the immediate and from the here and now into, and so where is this ultimately taking you? In the mid phase of transition, people become very short term, very immediate. As we start to move through it, people can sometimes be thinking, okay, so now what is the next bit that I want from my career? What's the next bit that I want from my role? And as you will see just along the bottom line of the parental transition model, you will see that actually we move, we never stop supporting, but we also start to increase challenge as we move along. You said this was important, so let's continue to remember this is important, and let's think about how we can articulate it again, because it's important to you, for example. So you can contact me afterwards if you'd like to find out some more in detail about this model, about how we use it, about how we help organizations use it. And at the end of this talk, I'm going to give you my contact details and tell you how best to reach me. That's what parental coaching is. That's why I believe it is important, and how at the kind of top line level it works. There's so much more that can be explored and talked about here, but in the short time that we've got left, I'd just like to turn my attention to thinking about the most important success factors when it comes to introducing parental coaching support into organizations. Some of you here today or listening to this today might already be familiar with parental transition coaching. You may have commissioned it, or you might be one of the lucky ones that have been on the receiving end of it. But for some of you, and I suggest for quite a lot of people, it often feels quite new. And there could be leaders here listening who are interested in how it can be effectively introduced into the workplace. I've got a lot of views and a lot of experience in this, but to start your thinking off, I just want to share with you a few of my top tips. So the first tip that I have for you is, if possible, consider introducing the offer of coaching early. Starting early offers benefits to everyone. As the arrival of a child gets closer, people often experience overwhelm and high levels of stress. As you've heard, coaching is a really effective and impactful way to counter and support this. In addition, early coaching interventions can help with things like effective handovers and ultimately a smoother transition of the work tasks and responsibilities. So from my perspective, it really is a win-win for both businesses and employees if this type of coaching is considered early. My second tip is involve your line management population. Set them up to know when and how to support soon-to-be and new parents in their teams. Managers really benefit from the insight into likely behaviours and needs of working parents, and we often help educate line managers as part of our activity by briefing them on the parental transition using the model that I've just shared with you. Managers' understanding leads to way more open dialogue and much better support, which again for me is a win-win all round. My third tip is, if you're unsure, pay careful attention, particularly to the point of return. Think really, really carefully about how you onboard working parents who are coming from any amount of time off, really, really thoughtfully, because nothing stands still for any of us, for employers. So when a person comes back into the workplace, be really, really mindful of what they've missed, what they might need to know, onboard them as effectively as you would a new starter who's joining that day. And finally, I would say don't miss the parents who are back. It is never too late to offer support. Juggling the practical realities of working parenthood is tough, and it's high risk point when people are back, and seeing if they can make it work. We see a lot of people leave their workplaces at this stage. So support here is essential, even if it hasn't happened before. So there's some key points I wanted to share with you. You know, at Motion Learning, we've lots of experience in supporting organizations with introducing parental coaching. We've got resources to support external stakeholders in gaining buy-in from their businesses. And we've got data to evidence ROI for those all-important budget conversations. So if you'd like to reach out to us and find out more, here are my contact details. Please do reach out. My name is Rachel Morris, and I'm the founding partner and senior coach at Motion Learning. You can find me on LinkedIn if you tap in Rachel Morris, Motion Learning, into the search function. If you sign up to our newsletters, you will get a lot of information that we share with tips and tools and webinar content. Please do that via our website which is motionlearning.com. Via there as well, you can reach out and book a half-hour call with us if you'd like to find out more. And I share my personal email here, which is rachel@motionlearning.com, because I, as you can tell, really, really love talking about this. So do please reach out to me. I hope that's been useful. I hope it's given you some food for thought. And Elizabeth, thank you ever such a lot for inviting me to come and to talk about this.
That was brilliant, Rachel. Thank you so much. I mean, those of you who don't know me that are signed up to our DEI conference, I have 3 children. Rachel knows me and knows I have 3. And so many of those points really resonated for me. A couple that I jotted down around that real conflict on work and nursery of I want to be here, but I need to be there. And that's a really difficult emotion to handle, and one that until you've been there, you don't expect to know how to navigate that. And I think coaching and feeling your way through is so powerful in that circumstance. And a biggie, and I can put my hands up to this, don't lose sight of you. When you said that, I realized how much I have, so much over the years. And I think that's a really important message, because as a parent, as a carer, as somebody adding a new person into your family, and as you rightly say, this is all parents and grandparents and carers. You want to give and give and give to that little person. And it's very easy to forget that there is a you in all of that too, isn't there?
There is. Yeah, there is. Yeah. We're all guilty of that one, Elizabeth. We know that.
Yeah, exactly. Rachel, thank you so much. That's been absolutely brilliant. It's been a joy to have you today.
Thank you for inviting me. Take care. Have a good conference.
Thank you.
Bye.